ask about Tim Burton, because he has a very specific aesthetic. He's an artist himself, so did that make your job easier or harder?
On Corpse Bride?
Yes.
It made it easier, obviously, because in fact, in some ways it was slightly strange because he was absent from the set quite a lot, because at the same time he was making Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So a lot of the time we were making decisions that kind of had the what would Tim do factor.
Yeah.
And basically what Tim would do would be stripy socks, black and white, curlicues, and that's,
Sewn up face, body parts sewn on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, it was a great experience. What was interesting about it, I think, was that it seemed to be like a whole new generation of artists and craftspeople who'd got into stop motion animation, and we're all poised like coiled springs waiting for a feature to come along. And that came along and we all just leapt on it. We were all young. We got along very well, the whole crew. We got drunk a lot.
Good. It's inspiring.
It was inspiring, yes. I think.
Yes. So after Corpse Bride, you actually, the most recent Leica film that you worked on was Coraline. And now on this film, you were actually the writer and the co-director of this.
I know, right?
Yeah, after you were a storyboard artist and then you were in charge of character design. This seems like a pretty giant...
I was head of story. I wasn't in charge of character design. I did a couple. I don't mind you saying that, though. I don't mind that getting out there. I think Henry Selick would probably kill me, but that's okay. Yeah, that was a fantastic experience. Coraline was an incredible movie, really. I mean, it was just so different. It broke all the formulas for family animated movies, and it made me realize that Leica was a very special place.
Yeah.
And of course, during Coraline, I showed the first 30 pages of my script for ParaNorman to Henry Selick, because I figured I wanted some input from someone who would be essentially brutally honest, and that's Henry. So I gave it to him, and I was expecting him to tear it into pieces and throw it at my face, but instead he kind of said, "Where's the rest of it? I think we should show this to Travis Knight, who is the CEO of the studio. He's also producer of the movie and a lead animator." And he said a similar thing. He said, "Yeah, I love it. Where's the rest?" And I said, "Oh, it's back home," and it wasn't.
Did you, by back home, you meant in England?
No.
So it's going to take me, I have to go on a boat to get it.
Yeah, I don't know how, I was still working on Coraline at the time. I knew what the movie was. I had it all kind of roughed out in notebooks.
Did you, now he's a young boy who's an outcast who can see dead people.
Yes.
And he's called upon by his town at one point to sort of be a hero, possibly.
Yes, essentially, yes. He's like the town pariah. He doesn't fit in because he sees and speaks to dead people. But he's kind of like the flip side of Haley Joel Osment. This is no Sixth Sense. He doesn't have a problem speaking to the dead. It's speaking to the living that's the issue.
Right, the dead are sort of his friends.
Yeah, the dead are cool.
Exactly. And you actually describe yourself when you were a kid as Norman. Do you feel like...
yeah.
Do you feel like that you were writing the film that you wanted to see or should have seen when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was writing the film that I wanted to see. I didn't care who else wanted to see it. It was my movie. No, there's been this thing about it being Norman is me, and it certainly is true to us to an extent, but I wanted him to represent what it is like to be 11 years old. And I think you don't have to be weird to not fit in when you're 11. I think most people know what it feels like to not quite be a child, not quite be an adult, and not know how you fit into the world. And that to me was the key for Norman's character, was to strip away the years of maturity that I had accumulated and try, and it's not funny, and try and remember what it was like to be that awkward child. It's funny because there was this short film that went out that Wyden and Kennedy put together with me, talking about how sad my life was, My mum and dad saw it and were outraged.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, but tough.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Livewire Radio, and we're interviewing Chris Butler, the writer-director of ParaNorman. So this is, for people who may not know, this is a stop-motion animated film. So it's created with actual puppets in the real world, small puppets in tiny little clothing, and shot on actual sets.
Yeah.
With 60, you had 60 cameras, right?
Yeah, well, we had 52 or 54 units. Don't ask me numbers.
Okay.
But it was about that, and we had 26 animators, I think, at the height of production. So it's a lot of stuff going on. I think there were 28 Normans. That's probably wrong as well, but there were a lot.
Yeah, and he had 8,800 different faces that you printed out.
Apparently, he had the capability of having 1.5 million expressions, which is more than anyone needs.
I believe it is. It's more than an actual human being needs.
Yeah.
And this is so much work. What do you think, for you, what's the most significant difference in characters that are created digitally and characters that are created with human hands?
I think, I always go back to, in 2D animation, what's on screen is a drawing of an object. In CG, it is a digital model of an object. In stop motion, it is the object. And that kind of connects to you on a fundamental level. There's something nostalgic about stop motion. It takes you back to, thinking that your toys were coming alive. You can physically see this object on screen moving of its own accord. It's black magic in a sense. We would have been burned for it 300 years ago.
Yes, absolutely.
But I do think that's an important part of it, is that what you see on the screen, you can see that it's handmade. You can see the stitching in the clothes. You can see what amounts to the imperfection. And that's what makes it real. It's always funny to me that these CG guys have NASA scientists trying to work out how to create imperfection, and we get it for free.
Just a little bit of hot glue in the wrong spot, and you're good.
Just slap it on, it's good.
Well, I have to say, and you're saying that, I think that more than any other film I've ever seen, as I was watching it, I was aware of the form, and sort of, in some cases, I was taken out of the story a little bit because it was so stunning. Well, I think, I was wondering if that would bother you, because
it does now.
I was taken out of the story for a really good reason, though.
Okay, that's probably because you're really smart.
Not so much. Yeah.
No, but I do think people watch these things for different reasons. A lot of people are drawn to this medium because it is so gorgeous and they understand how it's put together. But I think, importantly, it doesn't really matter how it's made. What it comes down to is, I think you need to buy into the story. What we wanted to really do on this movie was make you believe that Norman was real. You okay there? Okay, good. I've got a cold too. It sucks. Thank you. You need to really believe that these kids, if they get into trouble, they genuinely are in jeopardy. If they fall over, they hurt themselves. And we always called it a skewed naturalism. I think the fact that you are, taken out of it because you appreciate the art form is probably because you know the art form, you understand what goes into it. But the majority of people, I don't think, do.
Well, I also think that the character design on it, and I read a great quote from you about the character design. You said that Heidi Smith is the character designer, and you called her characters beautifully grotesque. And that was such a perfect phrase for the way that these characters looked, because they didn't look, I think that that's part of the art of it, that made it really interesting, is that they didn't really look exactly like humans. They certainly, and in most cases, they weren't so pretty, but they were beautifully grotesque.
Yes.
What was the reasoning behind that?
It's observational, and I think sometimes the best observational art can be grotesque. It can be purposefully ugly. Mm-hmm. And it pertained to this story in a very specific way. This story is about a town that is rotten. It's obviously a zombie movie, so they're rotten too. But this is about a group of people who are kind of papering over the nasty history of their town. It made sense to accentuate the ugliness of it. Right from day one, I didn't want this to follow the normal parameters of an animated movie. I didn't want it to be a pixel perfect, pastel painted, white picket fences, you know. I didn't want that. I wanted it to feel like a real place. I wanted the apple pies warming on, or cooling on windowsills to be more like the apple pies you get from a McDonald's Happy Meal rather than a home-baked, you know?
Yeah, those beautiful, adorable ones that you see in girls' doll houses.
Exactly. It was supposed to be, we wanted it to be a representation of the real world. It's not a perfect place. That may seem a little dark for a kid's movie, but again, what it came down to for me was relatability. And because it did have what I thought were important themes for a kid, and it does have something to say about bullying and intolerance, I wanted it to be a believable place for the kids in the audience. We've had a similar thing with like the family dynamic in the movie, for example. Norman's parents are not perfect.
Yeah.
In fact, they're crap.
Well, his mom's kind of sweet. His father's got some issues.
She's pretty vapid. But yeah, she's likable enough. But the idea there was, you know, it went back to a lot of the influences. It went back to the kind of family movie making in the 80s that was a little bit more irreverent, a little more daring. If you look at the family dynamic in E.T., for example, or the Goonies, they're dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But they're no less loving, but they're dysfunctional. I always think that every kid knows what it's like to hear their parents argue. It doesn't make sense to me to cut that out of a movie for kids.
Yeah.
If you have, you know, if you're making a movie for kids, you don't just want to say what they're doing needs work. You want to say what they know, which is that their parents need work as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, you know, there are a lot of kids probably whose best family relationship is with their dead grandmother, right? No, probably not.
That actually does come from me.
Does it?
Yeah.
Did you talk to your grandmother when you were a kid?
I mean, yes, when she was alive. But no, okay, I'm glad that my mother won't hear this. When my Nana, when she was alive, she used to say to me that when she died, she was going to stick around to make sure I was okay. You can take that in two ways. Either, oh, that's sweet, she's looking out for you. Oh, that's really creepy.
Yeah.
I actually thought it was a perfect way for someone to introduce the concept of death to a child. It didn't make it scary at all to me. And I had a very strong relationship with my Nana, and I still do. I don't talk to her, she's never visited me. But that's where the idea came from. It was this idea that I'm gonna haunt you to make sure you're okay. Yeah.
Well, Elaine Stritch plays the grandmother, and
Yes.
she's amazing in it, and it's an incredibly sweet relationship, and the movie is really this great combination of creepy and sweet, which, you know, that's the best of life, right? I think. You know, everything's a little creepy and a little sweet.
Yeah.
And it really is visually stunning. It's a great movie, and it's still in theaters now. The movie is ParaNorman. The director, writer is Chris Butler. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.